Thank you very much, and welcome to everyone for joining us here this evening. As Seamus explained there, my name is Suzanne Lynch. I'm Bureau Chief with Bloomberg here in Brussels, and in various roles have been a long time chronicler of what's been happening in Brussels over the years. So this report today, it's fascinating. I think in particular, it's extremely timely. This is a subject that has really returned, or really is having its moment in a sense. And maybe I'll start with you, Matteo Renzi. We were chatting before about days of old at European Council summits over 10 years ago. And the focus was very different. People didn't seem to be talking as much about tech, competitiveness, the need to get ahead. Do you think, we'll start with a positive. Do you think that at least now there is a conversation around Europe and around the world about the primacy and the importance of tech sovereignty, innovation to economic growth?
I think 10 years ago, during the discussion in European Council, there was this clear message: tech was decisive, crucial, the most important point. Also because the world of 10 years ago was a different world. Europe was more central than today. The global world seems, I don't know if we can use more wise than today, but of course more clear in the divisions. President Obama wasn't President Trump. Russia of 10 years ago had a lot of problems, but wasn't the Russia of today. And China, Xi Jinping was the first steps of his impressive leadership. So in this framework, I think 10 years ago was a total different world. Now, tech are the key point, and is also our most terrible problem if you look the numbers. In the report, I suggest to read this very interesting report. There are some data points absolutely interesting. The numbers of companies in USA who have more than $10 billion evaluation, $10 billion, are 200, in the last 20 years, are 243. The number of European companies, we arrive at the same level, $10 billion plus, are 14, 1-4. That means we have a problem not with a unicorn, but with the giants. And I think, as Susan, you said, this is a perfect timing, because with artificial intelligence, with potential quantum computing, and with a revolution around the world, that is time for Europe to bring finally the point at the center of every discussion and debate, not with a bureaucratic approach, but with a political strategy.
Interesting. And talking of bureaucratic approach, but take that as a compliment as one of the most senior officials here in this town working on these issues. Do you think there has been a change? We heard from President von der Leyen at the beginning of her second 5-year mandate that competitiveness was now a focus. What specifically is the European Commission doing in this field when it comes to AI and tech? Because unfortunately, when a lot of people think about Brussels, they think of regulation. They think of the DSA, the DMA, the AI Act. But is there enough focus at the moment on creation as well as regulation?
Thank you. And first of all, thank you to the Tony Blair Institute and for the invitation. Thank you to Matteo Renzi, and thank you for the report. I think I like a lot the report. Let me say it straight and clear, because it's a report that is not the usual thing. And the US and China are better than Europe. Europe has no hope and whatever. Look at this, look at that. It's a report that says we can make it. Of course, it's critical, because we need to be critical about the last 20 years in tech evolution in Europe, but also says clearly we have a model to defend, an economic model. We have 12 trillion of savings. So we are the second richest economy of the world. So there's no reason why we should already say we have failed. And this is, I think, and also the message about leadership is very important. And let me go to one point where I would start my answer to you. The first point is the narrative. My president goes to the Innovation Week in Turin. She speaks of things which are very similar to the report about changing healthcare, AI first, investments, speaks about, and I will explain more, the massive investment in gigafactories. Then there's Jeff Bezos, also invited, that speaks about people being on the moon and living there and having data centers. I mean, would you expect more importance to be given to the message Europe is changing an evolution, or a thing, frankly, I mean, of a science fiction book, Man on the Moon? I mean, every newspaper was about Jeff Bezos, and surprise, we will live on the moon. So Europe, first of all, has to recoup the narrative, which is the narrative: we are an economy that needs to change, and AI is the key. And I think, seriously, everyone has to take for serious, because these are serious things that has been done and trying to do. I mean, we have announced, I mean, for instance, a new program for preventive care in healthcare to diminish, I mean, waiting time, to have more access to preventive medicine. This is serious stuff. We have proposed ambition cities, I mean, to bring autonomous drive to cities, because, for instance, one of the good things of the AI Act is the same rule everywhere, allows this experimentation without, I mean, too many permits. I think these are serious things. And they are completely lost into, there will be a fight in Colosseum between the head of Facebook and the other one, or there will be people on the moon. So we are completely dominated by a narrative, which is a problem, because then all the things that have been done, and I like to speak in particular the largest industrial project that Europe has now, which are the AI gigafactories, are completely annulled by all sorts of things that catch the eye.
That's interesting. So you're saying that Europe is not getting credit, essentially, you're saying, for what it is doing, for example, on the gigafactories. But, I mean, is it enough what Europe is doing here? I mean, the gap is very, very wide. Like, for example, there's going to be, obviously have to be private capital getting involved in this. I mean, is Europe set up to allow that, to encourage that, to incentivize it?
Well, I mean, so the President von der Leyen has announced that we will build very, very large AI data centers to offer for free capacity to startups. In the report, it said that we have a gap in computing. So the first thing is to offer it to our startups, to our public administration, and to do it in a private-public partnership. And then after February, we launched a call of expression of interest. We thought maybe 10, 12 will answer. We got 74 answers, 77 actually, and we got 60 on offer, 230 billion of investments. And the largest equity funds of the world are working with us. So this shows that Europe attracts capital if we do the right things. I think probably it should have been earlier to say it's not, I mean, just something that you can do with the public initiative. It's not something, probably Europe is not ready for a fully private investment. The mix of the two is something that works. So what we are promising in the gigafactories is that we will take up 30% of the capacity for startups, for research, for public use, and 70% will be offered by the participant to the market. We are, of course, now touring Europe to make sure that this 70 proposal cluster, and we have a much more manageable number of this. And these beasts are beasts of 7-8 billion investment each. So you multiply by the number we will have, and you come with a result which is not impressively different from over here, the United States. Now, the difference being, by the way, that all the largest industrial groups are now working with us. The European Investment Bank, we signed an agreement, is working with us, and all the most important equity funds are interested. So I think it's also relatively solid. Of course, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. We will see. But it's a very serious effort now to bring the best of compute capacity to Europe.
Okay, Matteo Renzi, I mean, in this report, as you mentioned, I mean, some of the figures are pretty stark, talking about European, risking becoming a spectator and not having done enough. I mean, where do you see the areas where Europe can seize the moment, and what does it need to do to try and regain ground in this area?
First of all, just a quick comment, if you allow me, about what Roberto said. It's very interesting, moon, because Jeff Bezos spoke about moon, but for the politician, moon was remember us the great speech of John Kennedy after President Kennedy, after the Russia won, non-Russia, Union of Socialist Republics won the first race to the space in 1961, you remember? And when John Kennedy want to change the narrative, give the message, we will go to the moon before the end of 60s. So it's interesting what Roberto explained very well. But we need moon. Not moon as Jeff Bezos. We need a narrative able to engage the people. That is the problem. And that is the reason for which I don't agree with the bureaucrats. Bureaucrats played a very good role. The problem is when politicians are bureaucrats. Because when bureaucrats decide the strategy, that is good. But we need exactly what Roberto explained: narrative, storytelling, and capacity to engage the people. Just to have brief remarks about that, because I think it's one of the most important things. What type of sector we can use? In the report, you have a lot of possibilities. I only to remember some: agriculture, healthcare. Healthcare will be absolutely transformed in the next years. That means we will block cancer. Not. Will be impossible in the medium period to block every type of cancer. But of course, with healthcare, we will be able to reduce the timing and of the increase the timing, not reduce timing of expectation of life, and at the same time give a lot of opportunities in terms of organization of care. And in my opinion, bureaucracy. We discussed with the team just before to start with the event about how European Commission could change from here to 2034, correct, evaluation of 10 billion of euros of savings in terms of reorganization of red tape of bureaucracy and ability to change governments. I'm Italian, Roberto is Italian, there are a lot of Italians thinking if artificial intelligence could reduce the power of bureaucracy in our country and in general in our continent. So we have a lot of potential opportunities. We have two problems, big problems, and the report explained very well. The first is energy union, because we have a cost of energy in Europe is absolutely crazy, the double of USA, the double of China. If we don't consider energy as a problem of AI, we'll be not able to compete. So this is the first. And the second is the financial, Roberto explained. If we have a system, an ecosystem in which we have 1.4 trillion of savings as Europeans, and America have 800 billion. So almost the double. But we haven't an ecosystem of venture capital believable. We have believable, yes, but not at a level of America organization. We haven't a capacity to use our savings to finance our dreams. The consequence is with the savings of German guys, Italian guys, French guys, Belgian guys, we will continue to build giants in USA, and that is unacceptable. So it's interesting the possibility we can, yes, we can play a role in artificial intelligence, but we have to transform our technical approach in political approach. Because if we continue to say every report good things and we don't change, we don't deliver it, that is a great problem for the future of Europe.
But where do you think the blocking has come? Because we've heard for a long time about the incomplete banking union, the savings investment union, and there does seem to be a realization since the Draghi report, another Italian, that something needs to be done. But if you talk to some Commission people, they'll say, well, it's member states that are blocking this. As soon everyone's talking about the pan-European market, but when it comes to when the rubber hits the road, countries want to protect their own and they don't want. I mean, do we need more Europe in a way? Do we need more integration pan-European?
Totally agree. In this case, I have a personal opinion, not in the name of TBI, because what is my very brief thinking about that. In 2000, after the crisis of 2008, Europe lost the opportunity. Because after Lehman Brothers, Europe tried to protect our financial system. That is good, was good. But we protect with too much bureaucracy, and we transform our bank system in a very bureaucratic system. And just to avoid the risks for Lehman Brothers, correct, we gave too much commitment to the bank and the financial institutions, and we don't see to real economy. What happened? When we come back to recovery after the crisis, America invested a lot in a great investment, particularly in tech. Europe transformed financial institutions in bureaucratic giants, and that created a lot of problem in the real economy. So manufacturing resisted. The resilience of manufacturing in Europe is heroic resilience. But at the same time, we didn't have the opportunity to invest in the financial tools to help particularly startup, venture capital, etc., etc. This is my opinion, of course, but I'm Italian, was prime minister exactly in that period, and I had lots of discussions about capital market and banking union. I totally agree with you, Susan. We need a market, European comprehensive market in the finance and in energy. Yeah. If we have that, we remember to ourselves we are a giant. But if we are a fragmented world, there is a very important data point about energy. If we will change interconnections and location systems, we could reduce of 23 billion the costs of energy. And that is a debate. I remember a discussion with Spain and France 10 years ago in the European Council. So we can do, but if you ask me what happened in the last 20 years in the financial instruments, maybe ECB and also European leaders gave too much attention about to avoid risks to a new European Lehman Brothers. And so we transformed the banks in a very a lot of algorithms, a lot of savings, a lot of money bring and not in the economy, but remain in the bureaucratic assets. And that I think was
so not enough investment risk as much on the energy point, which is a very crucial. It comes up a lot in this report. I mean, this infrastructure challenge now for Europe to get ahead in the AI race. Energy supply, energy costs is crucial to this. Can you explain to us, how is the EU going to tackle that problem? Is this going to be prohibitive in terms of seriously developing AI infrastructure across the bloc?
Well, there's an issue, and I mean, those giants of like a gigafactory consumes like the city of Stockholm or even more. So clearly, first of all, energy availability. No large investment fund will ever invest in a gigafactory in Europe if there's no enough energy in perspective. That means that sites that are below 300 megawatt are not good size. And this is the first thing we are telling all this perspective consortia I want to build. Second is the price. I mean, the price that is quoted in the report, which is 0.16 per kilowatt hour, 0.16 euros. It's an horrendous price. I mean, with this price, you don't make AI. To be clear, I mean,
That's pretty stark. Yeah.
the price that you make AI, it's the price which is reported for the US, which is zero. You start to have a decent business plan at 0.8 kilowatt. And this is 0.08, sorry. This is the price again in the report. But we are aiming at much lower. Because if you can supply, because the reality of it, and this is funny, when a consortia that presented to us an offer is led by an energy company, then suddenly there's energy and there's low price. When the energy company is not involved, there's an issue.
Interesting.
So the other issue is that if there's direct supply, I mean, there's no reason why there should be a regulation on the market. I mean, it could be direct generation with green energy. It could be small nuclear reactors in the future. So I think we have to also link direct supply or extra supply of green energy to data centers, which can absorb it. So it would be a much better system. So in essence, what we are trying to do now for the Gigafactories project is to make sure all the energy companies are involved. We go for long-term contracts or direct supply. We try as much as possible, I would say 90% plus, to use green or atomic energy. And in this way, Europe has something to say very positive to the markets. But this does not completely solve the problem of much smaller data centers that don't have this kind of economies of scale, and they are confronted with prices that make the whole case for a data center very complicated. So this is something that needs to be solved. And now I say something that Brussels bureaucrats say always, but we have a new Cloud and AI Development Act that will solve the problem. No, there's jokes apart. I think we are now just trying to solve the problem for February when we will select the Gigafactories. The larger problem we are working with DG Energy indeed needs to be tackled on a more structural way, but it's not simple.
Yeah. And I mean, Matteo Renzi, I mean, we're talking about this kind of distinction, if you like, between political leaders and governments and bureaucrats, officials who actually come up with a lot of these ideas. Do you feel that, you know, in the most general terms, the public in these countries around Europe, and again, we're talking really about that narrative Roberto mentioned. It was a very good point in storytelling. I mean, what is it to kind of, you know, Europe doesn't seem to have got through in terms of, like, every country now in Europe is trying to get their budget together for next year, for example. There's a lot of demands. There's demands on defense. There's a lot of demands on current spending. I mean, how do governments and policymakers in countries, as well as here in Brussels, you know, make the case, or what should they be saying to consumers, to citizens around Europe, that this investment is so important for the future?
Not easy, because of course, particularly at the time of populism, populism in the time of artificial intelligence is not artificial intelligence. Populism is natural stupidity, not artificial intelligence. And if populism is that, it's easy to push everyone to say, oh, why you invest in this and not invest in our school, in our healthcare? And you have to explain, exactly because I want to invest in education or in healthcare, I have to invest in artificial intelligence. It's not easy. But it's not easy also because there is an approach problem of European leaders, European politicians, every one of us. We consider the priority is try to publish a content with a good number of views. We are very good influencer with like our goal is transform something in viral, but not everything is viral is vital and very important for the future of our continent. So my suggestion I'm not able to give suggestions and advices, but I think, first of all, Europe could play a role, as the Tony Blair Institute report show. We have to try to simplify and to cut the problems to guarantee this approach. Second, we can imagine, we can predict some points in which we will be crucial. For example, maybe artificial intelligence now is not we can play a role, but we will be not never as the United States. But quantum computing maybe could be the next challenge. That means a reduction of energy. That means a transformation of infrastructure. We don't know when quantum computing will become the priority, but nobody have doubts about quantum computing will have a lot of importance. The problem is not if, is when. So I hope European leaders could transform them approach as influencer in approach of leaders, not followers, but leaders, able to indicate a way also if today is not easy. But the thing not easy usually are the most beautiful.
Yeah, interesting. And probably the final word to you, Roberto Viola. I mean, what is, we've been hearing this, and this report gets, I think, that sense of urgency as well as the positivity that this technology is evolving all the time. There is no, the savings, the level of money that's here in the continent is just not being utilized. What would be the key, a couple of key decisions, policies that you can see the European Commission coming forward with that's really going to make a difference in this field? I mean, you mentioned the gigafactories, for example. Is that the core project? Anything else coming down the line?
Well, when I read the report, which again I praise, I was ticking the box. There's nothing which we are not trying to say or to do. Of course, it's very authoritative who signed the report, so should be hopefully listened. But I think the path is very clear. I mean, to transform the economy in a model which is... the report, for instance, says something very important. Says Europeans work less than the American counterparts. And this is not a shame, should not be a drama, it's a choice. Fine. I think there's no reason why we should now change our quality of life or our approach because of artificial intelligence. But denying artificial intelligence as a factor of success would be a dramatic mistake. The sense of urgency means now we really do these gigafactories. That means in February, then we start building them. I think we have a pedigree that shows we have the largest supercomputing network of the world built in 5 years. So when really Europe wants, I should just remind to all of you, there's no chip in artificial intelligence that is not built without an SMN machine. So without European technology, you have no artificial intelligence. Without mRNA technology, you would have had no COVID vaccine. So when it's existential, then the quality of Europe in terms of scientific quality, again in the report, knowledge, access to information and data comes up. Europe is good in crisis. I mean, we have been
That's
good
right,
to
yeah.
react to the Lehman crisis, maybe overreact. Good to react to the COVID crisis. A bit struggling with the invasion of Ukraine when it comes to energy. You know what happened. I mean, still we are into this. I hope for artificial intelligence, no need of probably the crisis is already in front of us when you look at the economic data. But we need this kind of moment where really, and this is again the key point, where the narrative comes from the top. This is the kind of make it or break it moment for Europe when it comes to transforming the society and the economy with artificial intelligence.
Okay, well, on that note, a make it or break it moment, well, I think this report goes some way to making some recommendations and analysing some of the challenges at this moment for Europe as it tries to place itself in the next wave of innovation in the tech sphere. So thank you very much to Matteo Renzi and Roberto Viola for those thoughts.
So
We have roughly half an hour, 35 minutes to reflect on what we've heard so far. But before we go into there, could you two maybe introduce yourself and your organization with 2 minutes so we will know what lens you're approaching this topic with?
Absolutely, I'll start. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me. I'm Matteo Danieli, one of the co-founders and currently Chief Product Officer of Bending Spoons. We are a tech company based in Milan, Italy. We're one of the few decacorns in Europe, along with Helsing, and one of only 3 unicorns in Italy. Our strategy is pretty straightforward. We identify companies and products, digital companies and products that already have product market fit, but where we see a lot of untapped potential. We'll acquire these companies, very often internalizing the development of those products, and then we'll apply our talent, our technologies, our know-how, our tools in order to unlock the potential we see in these companies. The proceeds we generate, we then reinvest in the company itself and in funding the next acquisition. This model has allowed us to assemble a portfolio of iconic digital products. I'll mention some of them. The file sharing platform WeTransfer, the note-taking software Evernote. Recently, we've added a video platform, Vimeo. And we also have in our portfolio an app called Remini, which is being used by more than 100 million people every month, and as such is one of the leading generative AI apps in the world. Given that our core business is making businesses better, we know a thing or two about productivity and competitiveness, and hopefully we'll be able to contribute to the discussion with an interesting angle.
Thank you, Matteo. We'll come back to the competitors angle. Hansan.
Yes, welcome. Thank you so much for the warm welcome and the invitation. My name is Antoine Borde. I'm the chief scientist and in charge of AI at Helsing. So Helsing is another decacorn indeed, founded in Germany and now present in 5 or 6 European countries. Helsing has been created 4.5 years ago with the premise of bringing AI and software to European defense, and has been growing ever since to try to achieve this mission. By being present in Ukraine since almost the beginning of the war and in many other countries. Right now, we focused at the beginning a lot on software and AI models that would be integrated to historical platforms like fighter jet or submarines. But actually, with the rise of the new types of platforms like drones, for instance, we've been actually transitioning gradually from doing pure play software to actually a hardware company as well, which means that for the last couple of years, we've been scaling up very big factories and production of drones in multiple places in Europe. So I would be also very interested to discuss about what it takes to build like AI, software, but also new industrial champions in Europe.
Thank you very much. Rebecca.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. My name is Rebecca Christie. I'm a senior fellow at Bruegel, which is a Brussels-based think tank. We have a membership model, so our members are 1/3 countries, 1/3 institutions like pension funds and sovereign wealth funds, and 1/3 corporates. And we do research on how to make Europe a better place in the economic sense. My personal research is largely on financial services, joint European borrowing, and the transatlantic situation.
Thank you all. Given that we have roughly half an hour or a bit less, I will give you a few rapid fire questions, and I promise you, let's play a bit of tiki-taka. The quicker you pass the ball, the quicker you get it back. The first question to you, Matteo. You have had first-hand experience of scaling in Europe. What do you think are some of the biggest barriers? And if you were to zoom in, what is the single most important issue to fix?
Sure. First, I'd like to start. Hopefully, I'll be brief, but please catch me if I'm too long. So the first thing I'd like to say is that in our position, we often get to talk to leading investors and entrepreneurs around the world. And when we present ourselves and we talk about what we're doing, the first question they ask is, why are you doing it in the EU? They associate the EU to a land of regulation, stifling regulation that hinders the development of companies. So already this should give us pause, right? Now, we are very proud of being in the EU. We think that we have access by being Italian and Europeans to an insane talent pool, which is probably one of our best and most important assets. And by scaling our company in Europe, we hopefully become much more inspirational for the ecosystem than if we were doing that in Silicon Valley. But it is true that regulation gets in the way of companies growing their productivity levels. And if I were to pinpoint one issue, which I think is a little old-fashioned and not so many people talk about it, but I think it's also very important, is that right now it's super hard to favor the allocation of human capital, which is the most important resource in the age of AI. Especially top talent is the most important resource. We are blocking the allocation of top talent in the positions where this talent can unlock the highest value due to some of the strictest and more rigid labor laws in the world. We've experienced the rigidity of these laws firsthand because we get to operate companies in the US, in the Netherlands, in Germany, in Italy, and there's no comparison. Now, I believe, and we believe as a company, that if you let talent flow wherever they can unlock more value, the economic pie will grow bigger. Of course, it's not enough to increase the flexibility with which you can hire and let go of people. You also need to take care of the other side, which is making sure that there are welfare programs that ensure that people will be supported in this transition. But effectively, what happens right now is that companies are subsidizing these welfare programs and not in an optimal way. Ultimately, if a company wants to let go of an employee, they'll provide a severance package that's going to be pretty much standardized and doesn't take into account the fact that some employees will be very quick in finding a new job, whereas others might need more support. So that should be the government's role. Ultimately, we believe that already starting here would mean a lot in terms of letting European companies grow, their productivity grow, the wage levels grow as a consequence, and Europe's ability to attract talent thanks to increased wages, retain the talent that exists, and attract investments from abroad.
Thank you. And I think especially when you touch on the labor laws, that is to, Roberto, your point also, that Europe has a lot of diversity in policy within it. So all the way from the German models where benefits are very closely linked to employment to the Danish model where there is a lot of flexibility with high welfare payment and more fluidity. So there's intra-European learning as well. And then turning to you, because you have been on both the research side and now also the building business side. What do you think is the biggest gap between turning Europe's research excellence into commercialization, and what are the pathways you see to improve that link?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Before joining Helsing 3 years ago, I was actually the director of AI research at Meta. So I worked at Meta for like 9 years, where I saw firsthand what it means to build AI and technology and scaling it up from like Silicon Valley. And I would say that when I think about this question and when I look at the mission we have here, Helsing or Bending Spoon or other company, Mistral, etc., the first thing is also to go there, and you're going to California very often to see how it works there, because I think sometimes we also like in Europe to look at ourselves and try to draw some conclusion and try to make it better. If you go to the US, you work there for like a month, a year, or 3 years, and you see how it works, where the energy or talent are flowing back and forth, or capital or the ambition is there. Also, the mindset is different. When you read it, you feel, okay, yeah, I read it on the blog post on LinkedIn or whatever. That's true, but when you're there, you feel it very differently. And so when you come back, and a lot of people are there seeing, but also Mistral, they have this experience, it's a different way of looking at it as well. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but I think the first thing is like really to realize that the work will need to be done, because here, what I heard in the previous talk was very interesting. We need to scale up, we need to go faster. Over there, they scale up and accelerate even faster than they are, right? So it's always something to think about. I compare to the status quo now, over there to try to catch up. No, they're going to go even way faster than they are going now. So if we want to collect or to catch up, we need to do that. So that's the first point for me, which is very interesting. And so then if I go back to Europe, yes, we talked about the talent. I think we talked also about the fragmentation of the market, which is a weakness, but it's also a big strength, right? At Helsing, we have an office in Estonia, we have an office in Spain, we have an office in Germany, we have an office in France, also in the UK. So obviously, the diversity of the problem and the profile and the strength that you have is huge. And I think the flip side in the US about having a lot in Silicon Valley is that there is a bit of a uniformity as well. So it's a super strong network. Everybody knows each other, so you can go very fast, but also everybody thinks the same. a little bit, right? And actually here we don't, right? We actually a bit like further apart. So I think if we can unlock the strengths of this diversity by a unified market, etc., I think we can become a superpower. Because if you build a team with someone from Estonia and someone from Barcelona, you have something that's quite exotic, right? But quite explosive as well. And so the last point on that, and sorry if I was a bit long, is also that I think these people, these talent that want to stay or that want to come back, that want to build in Europe, I think they need also to see that we believe in them, right? And so that's why I think the mission is there, is that these people, a lot of people want to do that. It takes courage, right? It takes boldness to do it here. As you said, when you say I'm going to build it in Europe, you're like, why are you doing this? What silly ideas? Go to San Francisco and do it. So it takes additional courage. Hopefully it pays back. But I think this is a lot the nudge about, okay, rather than slamming them into this is all the complexity of the regulation, the first law, labor law in the 25 countries you need to get to, is like, I think it's more like, okay, here's how we're going to give you a leg up to get a start, because Europe can be very, very nice. And then if you really push the entrepreneur like this, I think they will give it back.
Thank you, Anton. And also very refreshing that we start both talking about labor policy, but also the culture that predominates. I would like to turn a bit to the economic policy as well, because I think one of the things we heard a lot when writing this report was the lack of growth capital, that we have to go to US investors to scale. So Rebecca, turning to you, we heard Matteo reference in the beginning, Europe has a lot of saving. We heard the figure 11 trillion. What do you think are the most promising pathway to translate the huge wealth and saving that exists in Europe into capital that is actually deployed to fuel startups and tech innovation?
Thank you. So I would start out by subscribing to what Philippe Aguillon said about what a nice place Europe is for research and for ideas and for innovation. Europe is really good at coming up with ideas. The issue then is how you scale them up, how you get from a small and perhaps academic group of people coming up with ideas into a big enough company to possibly become a unicorn or bigger and to maybe stay in Europe as opposed to going to the US for funding. Why do people go to the US for funding? Because the money's there. They don't go because of the labor laws. I don't buy that labor laws are the issue here. The labor laws should be the last thing we change after we bring the growth, after we bring the mindset shift, after we bring all these things. You guys have money. You can work with the labor laws, particularly for the top talent. What Europe needs is a way to get that risk-taking and that pace of change here. There is a real sense in Europe that the markets can wait. Let's see. There's a tolerance for a friction in life that the US, for all of its problems, and there are many, many problems, but day-to-day life in the US has less friction in it. And that's kind of the energy that we want to bring over here. Capital Markets Union, now called Savings and Investment Union, includes a lot of ideas for how to get scale-up financing, how to make it easier for companies to go from tiny and brilliant to larger and still growing and more established. And you can read the white papers from the ECB, from Bruegel, from all kinds of places about ways to get that going. We need less fragmentation. We need more single market. And we need it to focus on the money, not on labor laws or environmental laws or other parts of Europe that you personally don't like very much because they get in your way. If you have the money and you grow, you can pay your people, and that's not the issue. So we need to, I think, the best way will be to focus our efforts specifically on finance, on cross-border finance, and on removing the single market barriers to growth.
So first of all, I say it's completely fine to have a bit of back and forth as well. So if you want to come back to and give some reflections around the labor laws, and then we can move on with the second question.
Yeah, sure. I guess that at some point everything is needed in such a dire situation. But the point with labor laws wasn't so much with companies that can grow a lot. Like for us, it's definitely not a problem to pay the severance packages that we need to pay to let go of people when that happens, when we acquire a company and we optimize the business. But what we can afford is not what the average European company can afford. So if you look at the economy as simply, the largest companies, fine, your reasoning applies. But when you look at many other companies that are competing and try to compete fairly on a global market, it becomes much harder for them because their margins might be more subtle. And so the cost of not being able of allocating human resources in the most efficient way is much higher for them. And when it comes to talent, when it comes to attracting capitals, in the last funding round that we've closed, we had a lot of US investors that invested in Europe because they recognized the model. But that also tells you that if you have the right idea, you can tap into global capitals. So I'm not sure about the urgency of one intervention or another. The reason why I focused so much on labor laws is also that you don't hear much talk about it. And for us, the contrast between the US and Europe is really stark. We've been through that.
Europe chooses that. Europe chooses to have healthcare. Europe chooses to have a safety net. And so the idea that we start there as opposed to on the growth and the ideas side, I don't buy it.
So may I say, I think that is perhaps also why this point of policy design is so important. And one of the things we stress in the report is this is not about Europe copying the US or becoming China, but to say, how can we design our policies to become a better version of Europe? And maybe that is more universal welfare, more freedom on the labor market. Maybe they can coexist. I think that was the direction that we.
Yeah, we've actually founded Benny Spoons in Denmark in 2013. We moved the company to Italy, so I'm pretty familiar with how the system works there. And the Danish system is actually great from the point of view of matching flexibility in hiring, letting go of people, but also great security. So that's a model that I totally support, and I believe is much better than the inequality that arises from the US model, which looks at the flexibility part, but doesn't look much at the welfare part. But I think we should go more in that direction and less in the direction of having companies bearing the brunt of what should be the government doing, which I think the government should.
You heard it here. The Decacorn is calling for big government.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah, and I think if Aguillon was here, he would also say that government has a key role to play in innovation design. I think he referenced the DARPA program a number of times. Maybe this, Antoine, is a good point to turn back to you. Especially, Philippe said that the government has a key role to play in fostering key industries like security, defense, energy. What avenues do you see for Europe to lead, especially in building its own tech defense ecosystem, but perhaps especially into areas of the next wave of technology revolution like embodied AI?
Yeah. So, defense is a pretty important topic. And AI is changing completely the way it's working. And it's doing that way faster than defense is used to do innovation. I think that's a big challenge. Because it's a double challenge. It's first a challenge about being able to have the right technology, which is already pretty complex, but also being able to adopt it at a scale that's and the speed, which is really, really important because, of course, you're in a big adversarial moment. And, of course, you will not compare the scale to reach market. You will compare the scale at which you can deter and still be able to protect yourself. And when you look at the other countries that are building technology and that are adopting technology, of course, they're pushing it very fast on the defense sector themselves for their own security. So, of course, this is not a place where if you stand still, you're just going to roughly stay at the same place. It's a place where basically you can be in big difficulties. This is the case in land, where in 3 years, the drones augmented by AI. Without AI, there is no drone war in Ukraine. Okay? The drones, we knew how to do it before. The drone that can be effective in Ukraine, this is just because the AI can make them work, right? So the drone are, of course, a hardware issue, but the secret sauce is a pure software and AI thing. But then if you move to the Air Force as well with the unmanned fighters, or if you go under the sea to all sorts of drones that are going to be able to listen to detect submarine or protect critical infrastructure, all that is new mass hardware that can be produced. It's not very complex to build, right? Much less complex than to build the most sophisticated thing, but you can scale that. And if you scale that and you have the right software, you completely change the game, okay? Everybody understands this paradigm now. Who is going to build it first, so produce, and then also who's going to be able to adopt it first is the second point, right? And so for that, if I go back to Europe, the big challenge is also for us to have yes, we talk about unified market, but like unified strategy as well, right? If you think that we are going to have 27 companies that are able to compete with Anduril, which is the leading new defense technology in the US, if you look at that, I think it's completely impossible, right? And Anduril is already extremely fast. So how do you do that? It's very interesting, and we should not be naive as well. It's not because it's European that the country will buy that and not American technology. Anduril is has made a deal with Rheinmetall in Germany, right? They are opened a big office in the UK, right? Because of course they see also that there are opportunities here. So if we don't build technology here, that is at the level of the best technology out there, we are also going to have other companies from around the world that are also going to take care of the defense market, right? There's no fatality there. Then just to comment on the previous discussion as well, I think this, though we talk about decacorn, etc. Decacorn is a valuation, it's not revenue, right? So when you talk about calling for the labor law or the investment or being that, I think when you say follow the money, of course we follow the investment, and at Elsig as well, we managed to attract the investment from Europe and also somehow from the US. At the end of the day, what we care about is actually stable revenue and growth revenue. And that's actually the scale after, right? So we should be careful about this now about unicorn, decacorn, because at the end of the day, that doesn't mean much if the revenue is not growing as fast.
Still living on a prayer, right?
Yeah.
Matteo, before we turn to Rebecca, I just wanted to follow up on Antoine's points of different types of approaching this technology revolution. So right now, a lot of focus is on LLM and developing AI and foundation models, where US especially have a large lead. But I think that you have taken the approach of more product-led in innovation. And how do you generally, where Europe maybe can have an edge in adopting AI as opposed to just developing the largest models?
Yeah, I don't have much experience in policymaking, so I'll just bring my own experience as an entrepreneur and try to extrapolate from what we observed in the company. So there was one moment in 2023 where the product I mentioned before, Remini, an AI creation app that leverages generative AI to enhance but also create photos from scratch, went viral and became, for 10 days in a row, the most downloaded app in the world. That was possible thanks to innovation that didn't happen at the frontier model level, but definitely happened at the product level, because we were able to take the innovation that was happening at the model level and productize it quicker than anybody else. And also we were able to create a scalable business model that would allow us not to lose money on every person that used the service. So we had to be able to create unit economics that would allow to scale that business, which is hard with something like AI, where inference is expensive. So the ingredients I see from that success were twofold. On one hand, we had a young, talented, hungry team that as soon as they saw the opportunity, decided to go run and catch it. And they did so really at a global level of excellence. And number two, thanks to us being already a large company, we could afford the compute that was needed in order to do research and in order to scale the product. We could also afford some level of bargaining power with cloud computing providers so as to bring down the cost of compute. And again, I think that these two ingredients can actually be applied at the European level as well. So number one, just making sure that young people, which will be the next founders as these new technologies is settling in, like it always was the case whenever a technological shift happened with desktop computing and web and mobile, it's going to be young, talented, hungry founders that do that. So let's remove all the burden, all the regulations that slow them down, let them focus on the product, on the technology, and then give them cheap compute. I totally agree with that. So I welcome whatever initiative, be it construction of data centers, be it aggregating demand to get better deals. That's definitely a key ingredient to scale up these ideas.
Yeah. I wanted to turn to you and maybe also go down a little bit into specifics, because I think it's very easy that we hear on the surface level that Europe needs to simplify regulation, that we need to harmonize legislation, energy and capital markets. But you have engaged with these policies for a very long time, and we have the omnibus package, for example, underway and so on. What both avenues for simplify regulation do you think is A, needed, and B, possible? And when it comes to especially those areas where we maybe need to coordinate and harmonize better, like in capital markets and energy market, what avenues do you see for success there in this parliament?
These are great questions. Europe needs to really think about what it's trying to fund. It's not enough to just say, oh, we need AI. AI, for many people, not so much the experts on stage with me, but people just think it means fancy computers. What are you really looking for? Are you looking for data processing? Are you looking for autonomous decision making? Are you looking for autonomous decision making with real-time learning? You know, you can argue that you only need certain components of that to do things like automate certain processes, run a drone war, things like that. The learning environment that we have from an LLM can't do math. Likewise, a math situation where you're taking calculations and building on those maybe doesn't have the same human-like styles of interaction. And when we plan on what technology we're investing in, Europe is going to want to make sure it picks something that can grow with the economy, and that isn't just the flavor du jour. You know, we have cell phones, not jetpacks now. Technology doesn't turn out like we think. The single market is our biggest benefit. People say, oh, Brussels makes things complicated, but it's not actually Brussels. It's all the gold plating from the member states and the European Parliament's efforts to make sure that it has a democratic voice. You know, those are our features, not bugs. As you've said, we have these different perspectives in Spain and in Denmark and in Italy and different places like that. But then you have a situation where every person who touches it wants to add something to show that they were paying attention. So a thing that we can do is when we agree on a standard, keep that standard. And in banking and in capital markets, that's the number one thing. We have pretty good capital markets rules, but we don't have a level of trust from member state to member state that everybody's applying them. So everybody's gold plating. So everybody's adding a little extra regulation. And suddenly you have all of this bureaucracy and all this red tape.
So we're coming towards the end of the panels, and I know we also have panelists who are catching a flight later tonight, so we will try to run out of time. But let's go a final round through the panelists and say, do you have any reflections from what you heard during the presentation, from Matteo's opening, from the presentation? And if you could wish for one thing to change in the European environment to allow for more technology and growth and leadership if we meet here again in 10 years, what would that be? And maybe we take the reverse order now, so starting with you, Rebecca.
Thanks very much. So I would wish for two things. I would wish first that we can move away from a sense of industrial policy and industrial champions to really helping companies run faster. You want to run faster to compete, not just move the starting line to achieve some sort of parity. And there needs to be a competition with the US and not just a race to fund things. The other thing I will say is that we do need to broaden our society and our sense of the workforce. We need more women, more people from non-traditional backgrounds, from member states who haven't traditionally been involved, getting involved, bringing these ideas, doing these sorts of things. We need a shift in society and how we balance, as opposed to saying, yes, on paper we're diverse, but in real life, this is the way we've always done it. And, you know, we don't have time to stop and change now. I would argue that it's very important that we change now in terms of getting these extra voices into the conversation, to bring their ideas, to use Europe's depth for its advantage.
Antoine?
Yes, when I look at compute and the AI gigafactory, I think this is excellent, but I think there are some failure mode as well, and so I wish they are used well. And so for me, using them well means two things. It means like actually have decent compute for a lot of the students, master and PhD, so that they learn to build and to experiment at scale. I think when I was at Meta, the students we had, and we had a lot, were basically fortunate to be able to train with like 10, 20, 100 GPUs just to try it out. It makes a big difference when you go in the job market because you know how to use this tool better than the other one that had 1 or 2 GPU in the university. And so the first venture you do, you're way better already. And so I think it makes great builder later because you have an edge. So I think a bigger the compute should go to like train those new generation to be able to know the concept, but to apply them. Once again, it's not like 10,000 GPUs, but 100 GPU. It makes a big difference compared to one. And the second angle is like then the rest of the compute is focused on some bets. What I don't think is working is peanut buttering a bit of compute here and there, a bit of compute here and there, like, oh, we have, why don't we have one Mistral per country or something like this, or maybe one blending spoon per countries, etc. This is very hard. It doesn't mean that it's only one LLM champion in Europe. I think this is also extreme focus, right? But it cannot be like 25. So how do you make it like there is a lot of, and the students know how to use compute at scale, at reasonable scale, and then how do you make sure that the best win? Philippe Aguillon talked about competition. I think this is very important. Right now, I think this is a bit biased because either you are your national champion and there is no competition, but then you are actually the competition across the market is not super good. So I think this is really how we need to use this resource very wisely.
Thank you. Matteo, any final thoughts?
Yeah, so, well, maybe a couple of things. So number one, I'll connect back to something I said earlier. I believe that the more AI advances, the more the top talent, those that still create an alpha with respect to what AI creates, are the most important pieces of the puzzle, and we should do everything possible to retain those people, have them stay in Europe, start companies in Europe. I'm not sure what the recipe will be, but that's super important. And maybe on the other side of the equation, we need to prepare, we need to think for a future where AI evolves super rapidly, and this will inevitably lead to job loss and things like this. And there are two ways we can approach that. We can ease into that future, thinking about smart policies. Maybe it's big government, who knows? But we need to find a solution there. If we don't ease into that future, it's much more likely that we'll crash into that future and we'll have social unrest, and it's going to be much, much harder to retain what we've built through the decades in Europe.
Yes, thank you all. Just two closing remarks also from my side. At the Tony Blair Institute, we work in 40 countries around the world advising political leaders. And in doing so, we often use Europe also as positive example for many things. And it's important to forget that in this debate. Just to take two super quick examples. When leading researchers at Princeton work on machine learning on human populations, they fly into Netherlands because the Netherlands is the only country with well-curated data in a secure environment. So the best US researchers come here. Similarly, a UK company, Oxford Ionics, was recently procured by IonQ, a US-based firm, but all the hardware is built in Europe. It's built in Switzerland, it's built in Netherlands, it's built in Germany. So Europe really have world-leading research, hardware manufacturing, automotive, and I think we've seen some of companies also in the softwares right here on stage today. So I think that with the right political level leadership, this is really a moment in which Europe can compete on the global stage. But to re-emphasize and to bring it back to the political leadership, I would like to first thank our panelists with an applause. Yes. And then welcome up Matteo Renzi on stage for closing remarks.
I think we don't need final remarks, because I think this is the first step. It's not the first really, but I believe if we believe really in the necessity to bring this point and put in the agenda of European Union with a different approach until today, I think this is not the final remarks. This is the first step. Probably we have to organize some events also in the single state, because it's important to spread the necessity also for member of parliament, for opinion leaders to discuss with a different approach, and of course continue to work with the people who attend today. Very thanks. And also a special thanks to the people who will continue to work, because with Roberto we discussed during the panel, if you think never we had a European Council dedicated to the artificial intelligence, only that is crazy. This is my opinion, not opinion of Roberto. My opinion, of course, I cannot destroy an Italian career in Brussels. But if you think, for me, it's crazy, because we had the European Council about everything, sometimes also with a very boring European Council meeting. So I think as Tony Blair Institute, with the quality of the job of Tony Blair Institute, we will continue to push in direction of give to Europe not only a list of problems, but a list of solutions. And I think that is the most important job to do, offer an hope and not only a problem. We will do. Thank you so much to everyone, and we will continue to keep in touch. Grazie mille, merci beaucoup.